listening to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host, Brendan Morahan.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the next episode of the Construction Big Breakfast. As you can see, I'm joined by my colleague, Ben Pritchard. And today I'm delighted that we've got David Beare joining us from Mott MacDonald. David has known both Ben and I for many, many years now, and really looking forward, Dave, to hearing about what you've been doing since we last met in person. How are you?
Cool. Yeah, not bad. It's kind of different times, but you kind of live through it, don't you?
You certainly do. You would have to. You've got no choice, have you?
Yeah.
Now, David, as you know, this is the Construction Big Breakfast, so we've got a really important question to get out of the way. I had my my usual porridge for breakfast. It's my staple. It's what I kick off every day with, including the weekends. But people know that. More importantly, what did you have for breakfast?
I had a cup of tea and a Snickers.
Snickers?
Yes, I had an early morning meeting, so I grabbed a Snickers and ran upstairs again.
Well, congratulations. That's the first. I don't think we've had a Snickers and cup of tea on this, so that's great. That isn't the normal. What about you, Ben? You can't beat that, I'm sure.
No, I mean, to be honest, you know, we've got a question both your choice in chocolate and choice in breakfast, but you know, maybe that's a subject of a different podcast. So I did something slightly better, but I grabbed a cup of tea and a bowl of cereal this morning. So yeah, nothing fancy this morning, but plenty of healthy and much tastier than the Snickers.
So there, David.
Cool.
Look, David, let's fill in the gaps a little bit. You know, I know that you've been heavily involved in the aviation sector around the world. I'd be very interested in some of your experience of that. You know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as it were, and what is the crossover between aviation and construction? You know, certainly if you go back to the Sir John Egan days, there was a lot to learn both ways there. So I'd be interested in your take on that, and then maybe take a pause, because the whole world took a pause 12 months ago. And then maybe we could pivot into what's happening with the aviation and what's happening with you thereafter. But let's go back to what's been going up to this time last year.
Okay. Yeah, so aviation is and has been a really vibrant sector for decades now. There's a lot of growth around the world. You know, the UK is at the forefront of that, and there's some real skills in the sector. There's probably 8 primary countries in the world that have the ability to advise on the aviation industry in depth, and the UK is one of those. So that's a real strength of ours. In terms of, you mentioned Egan, the collaboration that the likes of Heathrow and others in the UK aviation sector show, you know, that goes around the world, and as consultants, a lot of other countries, other airports want to know around what the UK are doing at their airports. And you could see from the way that Heathrow was setting up expansion prior to about this time last year. Again, they were highly collaborative. They really started to push a Project 13 delivery model, and really start to engage with the wider supply chain, and it's almost reimagining construction. You know, getting the DFMA really in there, getting logistics and the hub model going, and also creating careers rather than jobs. So making sure that people are trained and actually evolve and connect with each other as they go through the process of building the buildings.
And I know, you know, as part of that journey, you're speaking to yourself, Phil Wilbraham, and a number of people involved with Heathrow. You know, you spoke to, you know, Turkey, the new airport being built there, New York, all around the world. There was a real sort of drive to learn best practice. As a sector, it's always seemed very open to learn from each other, to try and make sure that the next new airport, the next hub, was better than the last.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at the way the aviation sector is set up, there's this confederation of airports around the world called ACI. It's like the club of airports, and very much they, as a mentality, really like to share. They like to understand what others are doing, and actually that really builds into that collaboration model. So it kind of not only the consultants and the contractors, but also the airports themselves, the clients, actually feel that collaboration very often is the way to go.
And do you find that on all airports? Because I know that, yes, you worked on a number of big ones, but you also, the Flamengo airport, I can't remember what it was actually called, but, much smaller airports as well seem to still have that want to learn and collaborate.
Yeah. Crumbs, it's now over a decade ago. I did a job in Ecuador, for instance, and absolutely wonderful people, but they act like sponges, and it's a slightly different context and a different size of airport, but they're always saying, what would Heathrow do, or what would Gatwick and Stansted do, or what would Manchester do, and they just want to learn. And going back to the consultancy market, these 8 countries in the world that can support consultancy in aviation because of the size of the existing local market, they're the ones that retain that knowledge of how to do things and all those types of things. So when you come to these slightly smaller countries where there isn't so much depth in the knowledge base, very much part of our workload is around converting lessons learned, bringing people on the journey, making sure that they haven't fallen into the same bear trap that maybe others have done in the past. So it's you do get into some quite capacity building type of context as well.
And I know that you definitely appreciate the broader picture of that, but that could come across as being a little bit process orientated. Obviously, airports, by their very nature, the gateway into the country, they are so important nationally to make a statement about what that country represents and to be both welcoming, but as I say, to give a sign of the culture behind it. How well do you think nations define that brief so that it is deliverable and deliverable in a way that actually delights and excites when people arrive?
Crumbs, that's a big question, and it's a little bit variable as well. You're 100% right. An airport is the first and last impressions of a community's DNA. And so if you're going on holiday on a business trip and you're arriving there, that first impression is really important. Equally, if you're a passenger that's traveling back from overseas and you see an airport that's really well run, there's a sense of pride in that. Often when we're talking to airport clients, they talk about their culture. You're talking about the design of the airport is often, some of them have cultural walls, some of them it's ingrained in their architecture. So if you look up at the ceiling, you start to see, very cultural images resonating through there. And actually that's part of the design process, is to really understand, what the cultural sensitivities of that airport and that total context is. And then that starts to make each airport unique. And you also start to get, that's how airports often start to brand differentiate between different airports as well. So if you look at, say, Schiphol, they've got the Rijksmuseum in there. You've got different flavors of different airports, and they're actually competitively differentiating themselves based on who they are and who they want to be as a country.
Yeah, that's really important. And I've always felt that the industry, the airline industry, has been so resilient. We talk in our own business about the importance of business resilience and the like. And again, we'll come on to it. The last 12 months, if anything, has impressed the importance of that. But in the airline industry, of course, they had to deal with 9/11. Almost overnight, their business model was broken. They had to adapt to that. And as a sector, we had to support them in that. Take us through that transition from your experience, how effective that was, what were the lessons learned, how resilient was that sector really at the time, and how quickly did it have to put its socks up afterwards?
So generally aviation, bar maybe the last year or so, has been incredibly resilient. You generally have a real bounce back of traffic quite quickly following any of these kind of shock events. If you're looking at not just 9/11, but say the Arab Spring or some of Bali bombings and all of those types of things. You know, the geopolitical events that aviation's associated with. You know, the volcano as well, kind of in Iceland. You do have a short period where, you know, you don't have the planes flying, but often very much the market returns quickly, and actually this probably makes COVID a one-off compared to some of the other shock events that we've had in the past.
And how would you say, how responsive has the construction sector been in assisting aviation to bounce back?
Well, in previous forms, I think the construction sector in itself, because of the bounce back's been quite quick, the underlying business models of the airports hasn't been that badly affected. You've had often the construction programs probably last longer than the shocks themselves. I think this time we've had a slightly different kind of impact, that really it's fundamentally hits all of the airports all at the same time. You know, the traffic is hugely off, and actually you've got lots of airports that can't even cover their fixed costs at the moment. So that then you do adopt a slightly different approach, and I know that a lot of airport programs around the world have been put on pause as a direct consequence. When you're looking in the construction industry's response to that, then, you know, there's got to be starting off with a fair amount of understanding. You know, these are companies that, you know, there's a fundamental challenge to their existence.
Yeah.
You know, the investors are having to put in huge amounts of money just to keep those companies afloat, and so, you know, you can understand why these programs are being paused, and obviously there's stand down costs associated with that, and we're very lucky in the UK that we've got other major programs to go on to, so the UK may not have been as badly affected in terms of the construction industry, but obviously the aviation industry, the aviation component, they've been really badly affected by this. And, you know, a lot of my friends and colleagues are still a little bit on life support in terms of waiting for the industry to come back and working through the issues that we've got around global health security at the moment, just make sure that everybody's safe.
Right. And what is the belief within the industry? Is there confidence that it will come back?
Yeah, well, it's and different regions are different. So the UK very much is at an epicenter of COVID at the moment. Different markets have different size of domestic markets as well. So if you're looking at, say, China or the US or Australia, you know, they've got quite big local markets, so it would seem easier to restart those types of parts of the aviation's global network quicker. You know, they're having to deal with changes to legislation, changes to government policies almost on a daily basis at the moment. But actually, I think the long term is that the fundamentals will return. You know, aviation, if you look at just the UK, Heathrow is responsible for 40% of the exports to the UK. Yeah, and so when you're talking about getting back to a growth agenda or kind of getting back to some level of economic normality, the airports are often a fundamental gateway to a region or a country. So, you know, it will return. It might return in a slightly different manner, but actually the fundamentals are, you know, there's huge economic and social benefits that aviation brings. You know, if you look even outside of the export side of things, you know, lots of countries around the world rely on tourism, and, you know, a lot of people come in through those airports and provide huge amounts of jobs for the local economy through the tourism they offer.
And Ben, sorry, did you want to come in there?
No, go on then.
I was just going to ask, and to what extent do you think the capacity will be retained, the skill sets, the knowledge will be retained in this vacuum at the moment, so that when things do pick up, that they can be drawn upon?
Yeah, that's a really, really powerful point. Is you know, there is a real risk at the moment that the skills will be lost to the aviation sector. I know that you know, our partners and our competitors and our clients are all saying the same things. So from a retention of that skill set within the construction community, we are quite lucky that the aviation sector, the people in it, often have transferable skills. And I know that there are programs out there where, and Mott's are involved in those, where we're trying to assign aviation people kind of work on these other major programs like Highways England, or kind of some of the Network Rail projects, or HS2, to give them a pathway to through the next year or two. Yeah. Because again, the whole industry will recover, and then it's a case of if we haven't protected those people over that time period, then we're going back to basics, and we'll be a lot poorer as an industry as a whole.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity, isn't it, for rail, highways, nuclear, all the other sort of programs that are carrying on to really sort of be that sponge. Except instead of Ecuador, you're in Milton Keynes or wherever you are.
Yeah. The pisco sours are better in Ecuador.
So I was one of the challenges for the aviation industry and sort of generally sort of construction and everything else for a number of years, and what was becoming a focus is sort of the issue around sort of the climate, carbon, and things like that. So you had this sort of burning platform in some ways for the industry already that was in some ways difficult to achieve when there was investment in sort of improving infrastructure and everything like that. And then COVID sort of has probably gotten off track a little bit, because it's hard to invest in improving when you haven't got the traffic. How does aviation sort of carry on that mantle of trying to decarbonize, trying to sort of drive better sort of ways of travel and things like that, knowing that investment is hard at the moment?
Yeah, there's a number of things in that space. I think COVID's really both digital and carbon has really accelerated the agenda anyway. There's there are a bit like this conversation here. People have suddenly found Teams exists, and you might get Teamed out, but I think there will be a subtle realignment about how people do business. I think there are things already in train around, and it's very much easier to decarbonize the on the ground infrastructure. But if you look at some of the mega trends around energy transition, around the advent of hydrogen, the advent of biofuels and all those types of things, you're starting to see a pathway to decarbonisation. So it isn't just around building the building anymore in the most green way you can. I think there's also the policy context is quite important. So obviously there's COP26 in Glasgow this year. We know now that the UK government are keen to put out policy associated with aviation at COP26. But in advance of COP26, all of the governments around the world that are looking to come to COP, they're looking to put their carbon budgets together to understand how the various different sectors of the economy play into the decarbonisation pathways of each country. So the UK has very much been leading in a lot of this. So there's kind of the CCC team that advised the UK government. They've been monitoring, and they're now up to the 6th carbon budget of how we're doing as a country. And generally, we're doing really, really well. But you start to get into that, starting to set a policy agenda, which you started to see in the UK government coming back with, say, the 10-point plan. And that's wider than just aviation. That talks about, heating. That talks about types of energy. It talks about types of surface transport. But each of those, aviation's like a mini city. So either directly or indirectly, all of those 10 points apply to aviation. So you're sitting there going, point 6 is the SAF point around sustainable aviation fuels or biofuels. But then there's also point 10, which is about green finance. and actually to upscale and commercialize SAF to make it meaningful, you really need to fast track that commercialization process and get the finance to fund this new industry that could be created. You know, if you look at, say, North Sea jobs at the moment, that potentially the SAF side of things could potentially start to plug the gaps and actually transition the skills and the knowledge we've got from the North Sea sector, those oil and gas jobs, into a new greener future. So there's lots of interconnected things in and around an airport. The airport itself, they've been for years looking at potential solutions to decarbonise and really push the agenda there. But actually, if aviation is going to decarbonise, they've really got to address that fuel source associated with the aircraft.
That's the biggest sort of risk and issue at the end of the day, I guess, isn't it? I mean, you can do lots of other great things to the infrastructure itself, but there's no EV equivalent at the moment, is there?
Well, weirdly enough, they are developing EVs at the moment. So you're starting to see the commuter level planes kicking in. You're starting to see hydrogen trials of hydrogen powered aircraft. You're starting to see them testing the limits at the moment on SAF. You can fly with a 50% SAF blend. They're now starting to test 100% SAF, and you're starting to get the energy majors getting really interested in this. So the likes of BP and Shell and Total and all these lot, you're starting to see a real drive towards that end of the spectrum. But as you say, the aviation industry, you see the airport, you see the planes, but actually there's a whole supply chain behind that. So all of the hydrogen expertise that we're starting to look at, say Tees Valley, where they've got the hydrogen transport hub and master plan and business case. You know, the government are looking at how we can plug that together. You know, they're looking at deploying carbon capture and storage to kind of production of fuels. You're looking at the production of green hydrogen and how that may go into future aircraft. So there's all of these types of things. And it's the tip of the iceberg is the airport, but there's a whole supply chain that the UK and the UK construction industry can really get involved in and get behind.
And what's really heartening is this is now forming the basis of an awful lot of conversations where even up to a year ago, I hadn't heard that mentioned as much, I'll be honest. It's definitely on the agenda. As you say, COP26 later is really bringing it to the fore, certainly in this country, and I suspect around the world as well. Is there a risk, however, that there is almost too much focus now on the environmental side of it and then not enough balance with the society and the governance side of it? Because I certainly am aware that investors are looking for and require that safe haven across the whole piece.
Yeah.
Is there a danger that people are focusing too narrowly instead of thinking of it more holistically? Or is that essential to really bring environmental up the agenda?
I think there's, I'd say it's responsible investment. So if you're looking at the policy context again, there's a real push for ESG reporting. So the Europeans this year brought in ESG reporting from a mandatory perspective. You've got TCFD as well, and the good airports like Heathrow are already starting to report on TCFD and the climate risks, both transition and physical risks. And actually, that, you know, I do think that that kind of investment from a responsible perspective makes good long-term sense anyway. So if you're looking at the number of airports around the world that are often based on a delta or a kind of a low-lying land and all those types of things, if you're then starting to say sea level rise, then actually that's going to directly affect those airports. So I do think there is a need to really respond to that agenda. If you're looking at the investor desire to get into green infrastructure investment, there's a huge groundswell of money for that type of thing. So I think it's a mega trend that we'll see in the industry, and one that from an aviation perspective, but actually more wider infrastructure perspective, clients need to start to respond and get ahead of policy. We've obviously seen in the press the Heathrow expansion issues associated with government policy that led to a pause on expansion. But you've also got the advent of things like the Environment Act, which broadens the agenda just from mostly a carbon context into a much more balanced scorecard. Yeah. You're starting to get into net biodiversity gains and all of these other things, and actually good infrastructure providers should be a benefit not just to the businesses but the communities they serve as well. I think that's probably where we'll end up getting to. If you look at places like New Zealand, for instance, they've stopped communicating around GDP growth, and they're actually starting to talk around shared prosperity. And so I think the next mega trend might be less around growth. It's probably more about the right, almost shovel-worthy schemes rather than shovel-ready.
Yeah. I'm conscious that we're getting close. As always, we could go on for hours, but let's just maybe start bringing this. But I know, Ben, you wanted to come in on that particular point, and then we'll start bringing this to a conclusion. And of course, David, we can always come back again some other time. But
yeah, I mean that New Zealand one was interesting, and it was the sort of before that. Aviation. As a sort of an industry, it does so much good, and it's laying the foundations for some fantastic stuff to decarbonize. But when you look at the sort of the Heathrow expansion and so many things out there just seems to be a real perception issue, especially with the general public. They'll never believe that it can be done, that it's all smoke and mirrors. How can that be overcome? How can you make the great stuff being done in the industry, by construction, by aviation, how can you help people really truly understand what that means?
That's a really, really big issue. If you're looking at aviation per se, it's got a context of people think it's a polluting industry, and the whole kind of social license to operate, social license to grow is a big, well-known thing in aviation. So the stakeholder engagement, the consultation through that expansion program was extensive to communicate with the communities around noise, air quality, all of those types of environmental factors that really mean a lot. But if you're looking at the longer term side of things, you're starting to get into a real need for coordinated policy. So one of the things, we touched on SAF earlier, having an integrated SAFs policy that not only links in from an aviation perspective, but links into the wider economy. Having a integrated hydrogen policy that links into the wider economy so that you can leverage the economies of scale out of both. That joining the dots across the economy is almost like that systems thinking approach. That is something that really, I think would really help fast track that agenda.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you say, it's a huge subject in its own right, but I think you're dead right about the systems thinking, and maybe just drawing that to a close. If you compare the industry that you came into, nowhere near as long ago as I came into it, David, but nonetheless, you've now got an immense amount of experience. How would you say your career has changed over there, and the issues that you are now having to worry about on behalf of your business and your client, how they compare with the ones you used to worry about?
That's a really good question. I've always been glad to be in aviation. Aviation is a bit like a mini city, and the business model is so complex that it's there's always a different angle, a different flavour. I think the focus, as you said earlier, Brendan, is it's moved from let's go build something into let's understand the context as to why we're building it and making sure that we're maximizing the benefits. So you're starting to get into lots of things about health impact, accessibility, the inequalities benefits of infrastructure. So how do we use the development of infrastructure to push society's aims forward? I think that is something where the social conscience, not just in the UK but globally, is increasingly at the forefront of why we're doing the job. People are more aware of why we're doing the job rather than just what the job looks like. And I think, going back to the policy side of things, aviation is probably at the forefront of that because it's very visible. You get in a taxi to go to an airport. Generally, the taxi driver's got a view on the airport.
Yeah.
And everybody generally has a view on the airport, but so we've lived often in that sphere for a while. You also see it from some of the stuff coming out more recently on HS2. There is a real social conscience that construction needs to be aware of and very much is aware of, and I can't see that stopping anytime soon.
And frankly, from a personal point of view, that's when we're at our best. Because I think that really does, when people realise the purpose of what they're doing, I think it brings out the best in them. So, look, I think that's a very positive note to finish on, David. I'm really pleased that you're able to join us. I look forward to meeting you in person before too long.
It'd be nice to go for a beer, yeah.
Exactly. Keep up the good work at what you're doing there at Mott's. It's really impressive, all the work you have been doing. I hope you do manage to keep, as you say, your friends and colleagues on that life support from a career point of view. It's so important that we don't lose that talent. So wish you all the very best at that, and thank you for joining us today. We'll obviously share your details. I'm sure you don't mind us if our listeners wanted to join you on LinkedIn or whatever and continue the conversation. But for the meantime, I really appreciate your time, David.
Cool.
And Ben, thank you for helping in delivering what I hope our listeners will agree was a very interesting conversation. But as I said, just the start of it. And for those listening, thank you.
I apologise for the noise pollution. That is a grumpy 7-month-old Dachshund. I did try and mute him, but I'm not sure if I caught him all the time.
I'll let you get back to him then. So look, thanks very much for listening, everyone. I hope you did like and enjoy what you heard. If you did, please do share that with others. Please subscribe. If you didn't, always welcome any constructive views. And if any of you out there feel you've got something to contribute, we'd be more than delighted to have a similar session with you. So in the meantime, all keep safe and look forward to seeing you again in a future episode. Thank you. Bye for now.
For the highest R&D tax credit you can claim. We help construction businesses get back millions in tax credits every year. Contact us today for a free review. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.inventt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.